Hello, I'm Gavin, and today I'm going to help you figure out what your connection style is. So, if you're new here, I help solo entrepreneurs who feel isolated in their business to create and feel a sense of connection and community around them. So, today, I'm going to give you a little preview, or maybe a little deeper dive into the model that I've used, that I created and use to help solo entrepreneurs when they come to me to start creating and feeling deeply connected to the people in their lives. So in my previous videos, I've talked about the importance of connection and community. And again, you don't have to be a socialite and be out there talking to people every day, but we need to create a sense of connection with other people, with people that matter to us and that are important to us. And I go through nuances of how that's different from being in a crowded place with a bunch of people. Being lonely, I'm feeling alone, has nothing to do with actually the people physically around you. I'm sure you've had this experience where you've been in a crowded room, probably like a house party or like a classroom, with people you know, and still somehow feel alone. So it's more subtle than just being around people. It's a quality of connection that really does the job in quieting that lonely feeling. So in my discovery, in my research, to try and figure out what that is and why it's so specific, I created what I call connection styles. And what these are is basically the different ways in which we human beings vary in how we go about creating meaningful connections with each other. So I'm sure you've heard the idea of some people are introverted and some people are extroverted. If you look in your life, maybe you're more of an introvert or an extrovert. Personally, I'm more introverted. I actually thought I was extroverted for a long time, but maybe it just developed that side of myself. Either way, I'm naturally introverted, and so I like spending a lot of time by myself and reading and studying and finding more about loneliness. Right? Whatever your style is, you prefer that more than the other style. It's not that you can't be, if you're introverted, it doesn't mean you can't be outgoing and be social and enjoy that. It just means on a good day, if you had a choice, you'd prefer being, at home by yourself or with a few people, doing whatever it is that you love to do. And if you're extroverted, it doesn't mean that you can't, value your me time. That's what I call it, your me time. Love your solitude, watch your Netflix shows or read a book. You can, but it all depends on where you prefer. So my connection style model is based off of similar variations in human beings. The idea is to find out what you value, what you enjoy, and the kind of connections that you want to create in your life. I actually discovered this, or maybe it just came to me, through a lot of different typology systems. I got it from the Big Five model, from attachment theory, from the Tony Robbins 6 Human Needs. It's an amalgamation of different ways in which I've noticed that we vary, we different. And why am I talking about variation so much? It helps to understand how we're different. We look at other people. Let's say we see someone who has something that we want, or a type of relationship that we would want to emulate. And if we just see it on the surface, not know anything about them, are they introverted, are they extroverted? We just think, oh, I want that, let me go create it for myself. And then we go to work getting the thing that inspired us. And of course, that's where ambition and inspiration comes from. But more often than not, we do the work to get the thing and realize it doesn't fulfill us in the same way that it will fulfill them. And that's because they're different than us. No judgment there. But I feel like you can still have your inspiration, you can still have your aspiration and want that for yourself. But it helps to start off by asking, who am I? Biologically and psychologically. What is it that my nature and my nurture has helped me to value? And this model helps us to give us that starting pin, so that when we put in the app of our ancient wiring and say, hey, I want to navigate towards getting that thing that I'm inspired by and want, then we know where we're starting from, and we know now what path to get there from that starting place. So let me actually dive into the model. So you've heard the argument, what matters more, nature versus nurture? It's actually a nice dynamic interplay between the two. It's not really nature or nurture, it's nature and nurture. And that's what I use to create the connection styles. So let's dive in. it starts off with, are you more extroverted or introverted? Are you more outgoing or are you more reserved? If you're more outgoing, you like being around people and you like connecting with people by having more conversations with them, talking to more people a day, probably being physically outside, and as the term says, being outgoing, and exploring the world with other people and maybe even meeting new people. And that's how you feed that need. Or you might actually be an outgoing, I call it outgoing independent, where you're more like, you like doing things out in the world by yourself. You might be like a mountain climber. You like riding your bike through like the hills of Wisconsin or whatever. Like, you are outgoing, but it doesn't really involve people, and you connect with nature and yourself that way. Or maybe you're more reserved or independent. And what that means is that you love spending more time by yourself and you connect with yourself. Now, that might sound weird, like, okay, how is it connection if you're connecting with yourself? One of the definitions of loneliness that I have is it's involuntary isolation. Is when you're by yourself and you didn't really choose it. But then the Eastern philosophers and the mystics and even Greek philosophers would say there is value in solitude. It's good for your mind and your nervous system and your body. But you're by yourself. So how is it that that's positive? Well, I define solitude as voluntary isolation. So you have loneliness, which is involuntary isolation, and solitude, which is voluntary isolation. So I feel like the reserved connection style or type of person, they value the benefits of voluntary isolation more, and they've figured out a way to get all the juice from that side of themselves, from that kind of habit. So they love connecting with themselves, and they, you could be, I call it reserved connector, where you're more introverted, you're more reserved, but you have one or two friends that you just love reaching out to. Whenever you pass that threshold and you're like, I've been by myself for too long, I don't want to be alone anymore. So you move from voluntary to involuntary. You have those few friends that you just have a call, maybe once or twice a week. And that's enough to fill your tank and you're good to go again. Or maybe you're reserved independent, which basically means that you love studying. Like, you're a person who is always reading, always maybe watching movies or playing video games. Like, you like connecting with the content that other people have created. I jokingly say that books and let's say D&D or video games or even Netflix movies, whatever it may be, they're content created by introverts for introverts. I feel like a lot of that miscommunication that I talked about in the beginning, where you'll see someone else have something and you're like, I want that too. It starts off by expecting everyone else to be like you, or maybe expecting everyone else to be the same. But I think that's starting off by realizing that we're all different in our own unique ways. And even in this model, you would vary massively if, extroverts express their extroversion very differently. Introverts express their introversion, etc., etc. But it's a really cool starting place. And it's a simple model, and I love it, but it really is dense in the fact that it takes into account the nervous system or brain centers and what really soothes us emotionally and habitually. Now, I don't know if that was a lot. I'm trying to do my best to communicate it here. And again, it's a model that I'm playing around with, but the people that I've shared it with and the clients that I've worked with, they've all really used it in profound ways that even surprised me. And I want to share it with you. If you're someone who feels that like you've created a type of lifestyle that maybe you've unknowingly isolated yourself, or you're just too busy to really connect with the people the way you used to, this model helps to give us a starting place. I like I like the idea of using like Google Maps as like pins, because you can open the map and, if the map doesn't know where you are, it doesn't know how to get you to where you want to go. Nowadays, the smartphones, they use the satellite and like the geolocator in your phone to say, hey, you're here on the map. This is your starting place. So put in where you want to go. And you tell the app where you want to go. The algorithm figures, all right, here's the best path to get there. So this model, this connection style model, it's kind of like that satellite pin where I say, hey, this is where you are. This is where your starting place is emotionally, psychologically, and based on how you've been raised, or maybe just your biology. This is where you're starting from. And then together we figure out, okay, where do you want to go socially? What kind of relationships do you want to create? What kind of friendships do you feel will fulfill you the most? And then we create that path and help you get there. So hopefully that was fun and helpful. If you have any questions or anything that didn't make sense, please let me know in the comments. I want to co-create this with you. it's a big task to try and solve loneliness, but I really feel like we're on the right path. You and I together can make a difference. Until next time, peace.